Alright, let's talk about the basics in the development module. And you can see here I've hit my development module and it changes some things. So you can see immediately we get a larger view of a particular image. And so if we wanted to look at our thumbnails down here on our film strip, it'll help us see those images incomplete here. You'll also notice under the navigator I've got this at 1:1. So this is showing me at full resolution where the sharpness is and detail. Sometimes I may want to put it into the fit option so I can see the entire image. But that gives you some options there if you want to zoom in and out. We've got some basic development options over here. And what we can do with that, first I'm going to is filter this, so I want to just put all the stars so I can kind of show you what we're doing here. But as I look at this image, we can start with the basics. So it shows us a histogram, and you can see that we have a decent histogram. There might be a few things that we'll clip here. So these little options here on the histogram will help us see the clipping. So that means that if we clip on this side, which will show up on the image as blue, it will create the clipping on the shadows or the blacks, and on this side it will clip the highlights where the white is. So in both cases that would mean that there's no detail at all in those areas, which can be problematic. But the first thing that we look at here is just color balance. And if you can see here that it's as shot. If we're photographing using camera raw, we can change those white balance settings after the fact. And so you can kind of scroll through this and see how photographing in different lighting settings will change how that looks. So there's this auto option. We also can deal with an eyedropper. So this right here will let us select a color or value in the image and use that as a neutral balanced white balance. So if I do that, I typically look for an area that should be neutral. And so that can be important. This image might be difficult because I don't know exactly what would be neutral there. So I think it was shot in daylight, so I'm just going to leave it as daylight. We can also dial this in. So if you wanted to cool it down slightly or warm it up, there's some choices there. Also changing the tint if you see that's appropriate. So you've got a lot of options here to start with the color balance. The next thing that we can do is experiment with the exposure, and you can see I'm getting a little bit of clipping as I move it to the right. You can see that that red area there is signifying that I'm clipping those highlights. You can turn that on and off with these. And then if I were to move too far to the left, you can see I've got clipping happening there. And that again just signifies that I don't have any detail there. But the exposure looks pretty good here. We do have options down here with highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. And that's going to give us value control or luminosity control over a more targeted area. So you can see that if I increase just the highlights, I'm starting to get those to clip there on that leaf. But if I pull that down, it grabs some of that. We can increase shadow detail, and you'll notice that up in the left corner up in here, how we can increase shadow detail or bring it down if we wanted. We can also brighten more of the light tones with the whites, as well as really bring up the blacks if we want. So those are kind of some options. And a lot of times we may want to mess with some of this, together where we're kind of working these. Contrast will increase or decrease the contrast. So you can see how that works. And a lot of times if I adjust one of those, I may want to go back down and then adjust one of these others a little bit more. So it's kind of a back and forth as you work through that. We have some options here. Clarity, and this one you got to be careful with. It kind of creates a little bit of a mid-tone contrast boost. I'm careful with this when we deal with photographs of people. It sometimes can add a little too much contrast that makes people look a little bit older than they should be. So keep that in mind. But with this image, I think it does give us a little bit of pop, especially right here. You can see these details there, so we can keep that in mind. And again, if I think that's too much contrast, I can pull that back. So those are some of the basic options there you have there. We also have a vibrance increase, so you can see that increases the vibrance or an overall saturation. A lot of times I might desaturate it a little bit and then increase the vibrance, but those are some other options for you as you want. So those are some really easy basic settings that we have for the development setting. And what this is simply just directions or instructions on how to process all of the data that our camera has captured. If we don't like it, you can always go back by hitting reset, and it will take us right back to the original capture. You'll also notice under here, under the history palette, you have a history of all of those settings. So you can see I imported that, and here's my little demo that I just did with all of those. So I can go back a few steps if I want. So it gives you those ideas and those settings. So again, it's really powerful because we have so much choice and option in those basic developments. So the next thing we're going to do is, let's say we took some time to develop a certain style or look. We can save those as a preset, but we can also copy and paste those development settings and apply them to one more or many more other images, so we can really do a lot of quick editing. So hopefully that will be exciting in the next video.